Welcome to 39-minute conversations. Please wait for your host to begin this meeting. Your meeting is now being recorded.
All right, can you see me? Can you hear me okay?
I can see you.
And now I can see you. Perfect. Perfect. Good. Look at us. Good to see you. I am very much looking forward to chatting. But the first thing I have to do is get through a quick ad read. I hope you understand that that's...
Oh, of course.
Okay, cool. So if you could just sit tight for just 1 second. This episode of 39-Minute Conversations is not technically brought to you by Babylon. From Damien Chazelle, the writer and director of Whiplash and La La Land, comes an epic 3-hour tragicomedy about the death of silent movies and the rise of talkies. Starring Margot Robbie, Brad Pitt, Diego Calva, Gene Smart, and so many more. Babylon is legitimately one of the most batshit, balls-to-the-wall, swing-for-the-fences, blank-check movies I have seen in a long time. Critics and audiences alike disagree about how good or bad Babylon actually is, from top 10 lists to this is the worst movie I've ever seen, and very little in between. Personally, I love movies that take risks and divide audiences way more than I like movies that aim for the middle and leave you feeling only okay. Love it or hate it, and for the record, I freaking loved it. More movies like Babylon should exist, so see it ASAP. Let's get those box office numbers up so mid-budget passion project movies don't die forever. What do you say? Babylon is in theaters now. And then we pause, and then, hello, I'm Brian T. Arnold, and this is 39-Minute Conversations, a podcast about reconnecting with old friends and making new ones, but I've only got 39 minutes to do it because I will not be paying for Zoom Pro. Last month, the 2022 Blacklist was announced, and for those unfamiliar, the Blacklist is an annual list of the best unproduced feature screenplays of the year, as voted on by producers, creative executives, and other industry professionals. And for the next few weeks, 39-Minute Conversations is going to be featuring interviews with writers who have appeared on the Blacklist. And kicking that off today, my guest is mega talented screenwriter whose career was already blowing up before he was featured on the Blacklist, so the sky is the limit for this dude. He's going places. The writer of Clementine, David L. Williams.
Hey, thank you so much, man. I love that intro.
Oh, thanks, man. I hope you do. I designed it to make you sound good, which wasn't that hard to do. It'd be harder to make you sound bad right now.
No, man. I think you crushed it. I think I'm overwhelmed with joy with how that came out, and you're obviously you're way too kind, dude. Most of my friends are sometimes too kind, but I appreciate you.
Why are we too kind? Why aren't you just deserving of kindness?
Damn. Are you a therapist? Because that sounds like that's a therapist question. To which I don't have the answer, man. I don't know. If my biological parents didn't love me, I have no idea. I don't know.
Oh, okay. Well, maybe we'll get into that. But I don't want to jump straight into something that serious. I want to warm you up first.
Of course.
Usually, David, my first question is sort of about how the last 3 or 4 years of the last 2-3 years of pandemic time have been for my guest. But the thing is, you and I didn't know each other pre-pandemic. We only met in the last couple years on Twitter, got to know each other that way, became friends that way. So the fact really is, I only know pandemic David. What is the difference between this David and the David of 2-3 years ago that I never met?
Oh my God, there's so much different, man. I mean, I gained so many COVID pounds that I've been battling with.
I think most of us did.
I know. I gained like at least 40 though. Like it was a lot of for starters, I was like really in really good shape right before the pandemic. What's interesting is that because I whenever I go to the gym consistently, I love it. I love lifting weights. But I was kind of maybe overdoing it for like a year and a half. As in I really pushed myself to get stronger and all that jazz. And then I found this balance, like January, like December through February of 2020, I swear. Rather December of 2019 through February 2020. I figured out this balance of not worrying about my calories and macros, not overdoing it in the gym, going out like twice a week or something, but still staying consistent. And I was just crushing it. And then the pandemic was like, no more gym.
It's crazy how like I mean, everybody always has plans for, the future and for like, oh, like I think a lot of people had a like 2020 marked off as like this year's gonna change some stuff. I've got it figured out now.
Yeah.
For me personally, like I had just kind of gotten over a breakup that had a really hard time with, and like beginning of 2020, I was like, time to get back out there, time to live my life, and time to get out into the world.
Yeah.
And also like I've never left the country, I've never traveled internationally, and I had tickets booked for Paris that would have left in March 2020. So all those like it was like weird timing, I think, for a lot of people. And granted, there are worse problems that the pandemic has brought up than I had to cancel a trip. But yeah, it's just like it really changed lives in a bad way and set us back.
Dude, I feel you, man. I was single like ever since I moved out to LA from 2017 up until 2020, and literally started dating someone like actually March 2020. And it's like the universe was like, hey man, I'll give you a girlfriend, but I'm gonna take away everything else about the world. We're just gonna go ahead and remove literally everything else, because that's the balance. Like if you want to be happy, Dave,
and that's a lot of pressure to put on a new relationship too. Is like, hey, we can't see anybody else. I guess it's only us. That's that's a lot.
Yeah, I mean, it worked out for 6 months, and then she left me, and like I have all these sad stories that I get the opportunity to share with you. But yeah, it was. No, you're right, man. Like 2020 was setting up to be such a great year for, and also like I don't know if you ever remember seeing like someone. I just remember seeing this really cool meme or tweet or something that was like, "Hey, man, Valentine's Day is on a Friday, Halloween's on like a Saturday night." New Year's Eve is gonna be on like a Friday night, or like a bunch of stuff like Memorial Day is Memorial Day is a Monday, but like some other yeah, I know, right? So,
Memorial Day's always on Monday, but this year it's a special Monday, 2020.
Dude, my roommates and I threw like this really epic leap day party, which was because the 29th was like that like a Saturday.
Sure.
It was an amazing party, and like it was just setting up to be this like really wonderfully. I had relationships with like. Granted, I was maybe being hip pocketed, but like with like managers I had been talking to, I knew a couple of execs, finally, and
it slowed everything down. It stopped everything. But speaking of managers and execs and whatnot, let's get into the writing side of life. So the theme of at least a few episodes this month, hopefully the whole month, we'll see how booking goes, is the blacklist. And so the morning that the blacklist was announced and you saw you were on it, were you surprised? Were you kind of expecting it? How did you feel in that moment?
It's a great question. It was like, I think I was trying to, so let me rewind a little bit. So like in November-ish, I was like really sick. I had bronchitis. And right as I was recovering from that, I got dragged into like jury duty.
I remember that. Yeah.
I was like, this is just the worst 6 weeks of my life. This is horrible. But there was a moment, I think, when I was going home from jury duty, when I realized that it was like mid-November, and I was like, wait a minute, doesn't the blacklist happen like December? And then I was like, oh no, does this mean, does Clementine have a chance? Like the last thing I need is to be obsessed about the possibility of being on that. So I did everything in my power to like just forget it. You know how it is. Like you try to manage your expectations and all that jazz. And also it's like, it's not the end of the world if I'm not on there. Like, things are still happening. I still have to build these pitches. I still have to write. So like the train's going to keep rolling. The problem is that like, the week leading up to it, my friends who I adore were hyping me up. And they're like, what's going to happen, right? It has to be on there. And I started like, I try not to be logical about it. I try not to be like, oh, I met, this many people. So, if a tenth of those people voted, then, chances, it like, I just tried to like, be really like, look, if it doesn't happen, I'm fine. So in the morning, remember I was telling you about like the universe, like having like this balance thing, which I don't necessarily believe. It's just like an ongoing joke of mine.
Okay.
Because it's way too often true. So or it seems like it is.
Then maybe it is. Maybe it is something you believe.
Yeah, I know, right? Just to justify my woes. That's why I just blame the universe in general, the vast, vast universe. But basically, if you consider how much I've been pained by the bronchitis and jury duty, I'm like, something good has to happen, right? And then the morning of the blacklist announcement, I just had like a really horrible commute to work because I take the train and the bus. And I was just like, are you serious? Like everything, like down to the minute, like very nuanced things. Like I use a bathroom and like I wash my hands and there were no paper towels. I'm like, well, since when are there no paper towels in here? And then I go to use like the tea kettle in the kitchen and someone's literally pouring the water out of the tea kettle. I'm like, like what? What is this? Like,
and then somebody just like came up behind you and stabbed you and it's like, oh, this day.
Yeah. And then I got married and divorced, so in an hour, it's like all that stuff happened. So basically, I couldn't be around my phone because I was just like the anticipation was too much. Because my friends who I love and adore, but they were just like, and you're in a good place when you get annoyed at your friends for being too supportive and hype for you. So I'm very thankful for that. But I was just like, guys, like I had to step away from my phone. You guys are killing me. But when I come back from the tea kettle incident, my phone was already ringing and I had like 4 emails, and one of which was from my team. And they were like, Clementine on the blacklist. I was like, oh, here we go. This is it. It happened. And I was just like, I've been really, really ecstatic about it ever since. It kind of hit me and then like didn't, and then like really hit me like a week later. And I was like, oh, that happened. So yeah.
That's awesome, man. Yeah, it is that weird feeling of I've already like, because like your script had already been optioned before it was on the blacklist, right? And then so and you have other things in development, so it's not like not getting on the blacklist would have like been a huge like, oh no, everything's over, like this is the one thing I was waiting for. But it is nice to have that recognition of, oh no, people do like people like it outside of like, I'm glad things are working out for me. But it was the kind of thing like when I got on it, it was I had the same feeling of like, if I do, it's cool, and if I don't, it's fine. And when I got it on it, I was like, oh yeah, this was a goal of mine and it feels nice.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah.
Like and I think you brought up a really, really great point, or like you're basically alluding to a really great topic for writers, which is like just trying to imagine. We get so conditioned to manage expectations and to that like we try to prepare ourselves for the worst. Which and for me, my excuse has always been to like conserve energy, like to conserve my disappointment energy, and but in reality, it takes just as much work to prepare yourself for that stuff. So it's like it's just a balance of like trying to be excited, but also to be like
the phrase I always use is cautious optimism, because like you can't be like, oh, everything's going to be great, because things are going to fall apart, things are going to like, movies aren't going to get made, but at the same time you can't also be like, well, what's the fucking point of doing any of this? Because like you have to have some kind of delusional faith in yourself that you are good enough, and that like, and hopefully that but at the same time you can't be blind to the fact that it's going to be hard. So it is walking a balance of hope and hopeless, I guess.
Yeah, and it's also a great point again of like it is a dream for most feature writers to land on the blacklist. Like it used to be, even like subconsciously, or like it may not be a priority for a lot of feature writers, but it's like, I mean, that's so many great movies come from the blacklist. It's like it's such a great indicator of where you're, the trajectory of your career and how things, it's just a really good outlook, essentially, at the end of the day. And I'd forgotten that it was a dream. Like I'd forgotten. I was just so like, I was in such acceptance mode that it's not happening, that I completely forgotten that like 10 years ago when I was in college, that was like a dream. I was looking at the blacklist like, man, I don't know if I'll ever be on something like that. Like that's just so cool to be on that list, and but
it's so validating a feeling, because I think that's the thing, that's the word that I think really sums it up, because like writing is so in a box, and it's so like it's just you, and you're like 6 months from now I'll get some reactions on this, and I think as writers, we're all hungry to be like, tell me it's good. Like, just tell, like, and so getting that feedback that it is good, and seeing it, on a list that prestigious, it feels amazing. So congrats again. That's huge.
Thank you.
And I'm Hollywood is still shut down, between Christmas and New Year's,
A
and
little bit, yeah.
will be for a little while, but I'm sure you'll get some more good meetings out of it, but you're already crushing it right now, like to the point that, all your friends are getting annoyed with how successful you're being.
Yes, and I don't blame them. Sometimes I get tired of hearing my own voice, and I get tired of talking about myself. But I know that, I just remember being like a college student or being like a newer writer, listening to interviews, and those interviews kind of helping me, with my development and giving me kind of some insight. And so there's always that like 10% chance that doing stuff like this like inspires someone and helps someone keep going. So it is kind of important, man. It's important to talk about the career, and also like the industry changes so rapidly. Well, kind of, but like especially recently, it's changed so much that it's newer writers, what they have to say is a little bit more relevant in a way.
Sure.
We're dealing with things that writers did not deal with 20 years ago or 30 years ago. It's a totally different landscape. So and it's also good to just like, it's very cathartic, and therapeutic to just like talk through what's going on like these days. So but yeah, like I forget what your question or point even was, but
who knows.
who cares? Whatever. But yeah, no, it's like and I'm sure that you and I, because congrats to you too, by the way. Like it's still a highlight of it's still a highlight of mine that you were on the blacklist last year. But,
stop! It's not about me anymore. My time has passed. You're the new young gun in the world, and I've got to scratch my way back out of the back to the top again.
Dude, this industry runs way too slowly for you to not still be a young gun as well. You're gonna be one for the next like 6 years. So
fair enough.
Yeah, but I'm sure there's other goals that like we've thought in the back of our heads. Like Oscar nomination, or even that kind of thing, or like the WJ has their own awards thing, and it's like
sure.
if we ever get, whenever it comes up, if we have a movie that's made and it's like doing the whole FYC run, I'm sure we'll be like, yeah, it's not going to happen. I've already accepted it. It won't happen.
Sure.
I don't care if it doesn't happen. Still have things going on, and then we get nominated. And we're like, oh.
It's also a little bit. It's also a little bit of that thing too of trying to like divorce yourself from expectations, because those things are out of your control. Like it's just the only thing I can control is what I create, is what I write, is what I make, whatever. Everything else is just like, there's no point in even trying to like shoot for like, oh, I'm going to write this to try to get nominated. I'm going to write this to try to get in the blacklist. I'm going to write this to try and sell it, because those things are completely out of your hands. I think it becomes like a thing of just all you can do is write the thing that speaks to you the most and that you have to say the most, and what comes from it. And we both got fortunate to a degree that the things that we wanted to write and the things that we wanted to say, resonated with people. But that's something that you can't really control.
Yeah, once it's out of your hands, it's like we'll see what happens.
This is an audio medium. For those who don't know, David just raised his hands like in a we'll see motion.
Yeah. So I didn't know that I fixed the lighting in my office so it's not like, so my head's like not shiny.
I mean, there will be clips, but no.
Oh yeah, no, I got you. Yeah, I finally figured it out on my end. I was like, oh, finally, I don't look like super garish, and
you look great.
Ridiculous.
I want to get away from the blacklist stuff for a second, because we don't have a ton of time. So I do want to start. You did mention like when you were a new writer and you were trying to come up, that you were reading interviews with people who had made it, or listening to podcasts or interviews or whatever. If you were to right now, be talking to a new writer who's looking for advice, what wisdom would you have to offer?
Oh yeah. What I always say is, I think the one mantra that I've always prescribed to is just and it's super cliche, but it's just, you got to keep writing. I feel like there's no way I would have any kind of semblance of success if I didn't just keep writing, 8 years ago, 10 years ago, 2 years ago. I kept writing as though like I think some writers, and not even like the majority of writers, but I can think of some where I pick up these vibes where they feel like the stuff that they've already written should yield some kind of success.
Mhm.
And I've always been, I think maybe granted that maybe this is subconscious, maybe I'm just wired this way, but I'm always writing as though the next thing is going to give me that opportunity, or the next thing is going to be my best thing. Or now, granted, I just love storytelling in general, so
Mhm.
that's the number one reason why I keep writing. But I've never really had the idea that like what I already have is what should kick off. You know, maybe it
Sure.
won't. So guess what? I'm just gonna keep writing. So um like when people who win contests are like, well, I won a contest. Why, why aren't people like trying to marry me? Like what's happening? It's like, well, try to just keep writing. Maybe the
Yeah.
next thing will win 2 contests. Like, or maybe you'll have 2 or 3 scripts that'll, like for me, it was like the way I broke in was like there was such a convergence of different things. AFF had to go right. The Blacklist like evaluation site had to go right.
Mhm.
Roadmap was
AFF
involved.
AFF Austin Film Festival for
Yeah,
those.
sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah,
No, it's all good. It's all good.
yeah. Coverage Inc. had to like, that script had to have it consider. So it's like I wouldn't have had that wouldn't have worked out if I didn't attack all those different things. So
Mhm.
it's all about persistence and continuing to write for sure for me.
No, I think that's true. I think a lot of people might say like, well, I've already got a great script, and it's seen, some people have seen it. Why isn't somebody else going to pick that up? And I've been guilty about that at times. There's one script that
Yeah,
I have in my back pocket that I think is still a great script, and I'm a little, I can get a little like uh annoyed that it hasn't gone anywhere. But it's
yeah,
also like, if that was my only like focus, was like, but this one has to go, and I just waited on that one or tried to only do that one, then I wouldn't, the next script wouldn't have hit. So it is like a degree of when to know, when to let something go, start the next one, and give, there's opportunities for those things to rebound, but you can't rebound it if you're just holding on to it.
yeah. It's also really important to long term, at least, to stay relevant. For lack of a better phrase, like it's just so important to always have your voice kind of circulating in the
Hmm.
industry. Because it's good. It'll, yes, they might use Clementine as a sample for like years to come, but it will only benefit me to have more things, because it creates more opportunities for OWAs. It creates more opportunities for things to get made.
Hmm.
Creates, it might be a perfect sample for staffing or something. So um, as opposed to Clementine or whatever else. So it's just really important to always have the next thing. And also that's why people get excited about artists. That's why we're excited about the Jordan Peels of the world and
Hmm.
stuff like that, is because sure, Get Out and is great, or Nope, stuff is good, but it's all about that next thing. We're all excited about his career,
Yeah,
long term.
yeah, I think when there's someone who has a very clear voice like a Jordan Peele,
Yeah,
it becomes like, I love, like, whatever this person has to say, I am on board. And
yeah,
that the goal for a writer, I think, is to carry that consistent voice into, to be like, oh my god, is this another David L. Williams script? What's this one like?
yeah,
Yeah, you want to build that brand and build that reputation. And I think I mean, Clementine isn't your only script that's going around and that is getting
right.
attention. So like, you're well on your way to that, which is very exciting. And
Thank
you're
you.
also just one of the most prolific writers I think I know. Like, it feels like you're always writing. It feels like you're very dedicated. Like, I don't think I'm as fast as you. I don't think I sit down every day the way you probably do. So what drives you to write? Do you write every day? Like, do you have a set schedule? And what drives you to like, every day I'm gonna hit this?
I actually don't write every day, but
Oh, screw you then.
sometimes I do. I write
Hmm.
like, I think I was actually just listening to Script Notes, one of the episodes on Script Notes, and I forget who.
Please don't mention other podcasts on this podcast.
Oh,
This
I'm so
is
sorry.
No, please don't mention them. This is the
I'm
only podcast that matters. No, I'm just kidding. Keep going.
Oh my god, I felt so bad. I was like, oh no, I'm so sorry. But no, someone on there was talking about like, oh fuck, I think I lost my point actually.
Oh no, I
Um,
ruined it with a joke. You were
hold
listening
on,
to script. You're listening to script notes.
yeah, someone was talking about.
Writing every day.
Oh, they were. Oh man. Hold on, I got this, dude. I got this. I got this.
I love this. This is content that people tune in for.
Hold on. Somebody was saying, you were asking me about, like, do I write every day? Oh yeah. So it was a really small thing too. They were talking about how, like, they don't start writing the script until they're absolutely ready.
Mhm.
So with me, it's like that's kind of gets broken down in some ways. Like I usually am just like ruminating on something or thinking about it for days, weeks, months, sometimes years. And I don't sit in front of fade in or what have you uh, until I'm absolutely ready.
Mhm.
That can also be for like scenes or sequences
Sure.
of a script. So I can, write like 20 pages of a script in one day because I was so inspired and like I was just like, oh yeah, I was just like in the zone, but I may not know how the next 20 are going to play out.
So you're not
I
a big outliner.
No, so I so I my reps want me to be, I'm sure, but
Mhm.
so I I'm very okay with like not writing for a few days until I figure out what's next.
Yeah.
And so I don't write every day, even if I'm in the middle of a script, unless I'm like, completely batshit. I know exactly what's going to happen already. But I usually, even if I feel great about the first 20, I'm not going to touch the rest until I actually know what that next scene is going to look like down to a T. Um, so,
So,
and yeah,
so as someone who's not a big outliner, which I historically haven't been either, but I am in a similar boat of like, that's kind of the expectation in this town is to outline. And, that might
yeah,
be, that might be part of your paid steps on a script is the outline first.
yeah,
It becomes kind of part of the job. But yeah, I think I've been similar that like I've kind of resisted outlining. I'm trying to get better at it, but it is not my forte. It's not where I feel most creative.
same.
But when you're pitching, how does writing a pitch differ? Because that is basically an outline, like an excited, like
It's
oral
so funny you said
presentation
that
of an
because I feel the
outline.
same way. Yeah, I actually have my picture in front of me right now. It's so funny, but I was looking at it yesterday while I was working on it. I was like, what? This looks like an outline. Like this is basically an outline. So wait, what was your question now? I'm so sorry.
I'm just like how like as someone who also is not a big outliner, like
Yeah,
I've had a hard like adjusting to pitches that were a bit of an outline, but also a presentation, and also needed to sound like conversational and excited. It was a tough transition for me. How's
yeah,
that transition been for you? Like starting to actually have to basically outline when you're going out for these jobs.
yeah. No, I'm with you, man. It's been tough. And I think learning physically, structurally, how to write down a pitch hasn't been the hardest part, and maybe
Sure.
even talking about it also hasn't been hard. But just kind of understanding what the expectations are for pitching, and it's such a different craft, and people will have different needs from
Hmm.
when you're pitching. Like no one really cares about if you've developed a really good story. It's like it's more about how you convey your vision and how if you have to have conviction when you do it and all these things, and it's like and you get one shot in most cases,
Yeah.
and it's so different from like from a fundamental like principle standpoint. It's nothing to do with screenwriting. It's like screenwriting, you have different drafts, you have
Sure.
conversations, you brainstorm about these things. So ideally you'd be doing the same thing with execs when you're trying to pitch an idea. Like
Yeah,
you
you'd
tell a
think,
couple,
but no,
you
you
think
got
that you get one chance to and you kind of have to be like a sales agent. You kind of
yeah,
have to I mean, there have been ideas of mine where I'm like writing them down. I'm like, oh man, this is really great for the story. This is incredible. But does it fit the vision? Is it something that fits? Does it fit the outlook that I'm trying to present? Does it, does it, is it something that they can look back on and be like, oh yeah, that's something we liked because it's, we can they easily associate a hook or an idea with you
hmm
specifically? So you kind of have to worry about selling that, and then that hopefully that leads to you getting paid, and then you can worry about writing a good script. Then you can shift gears. So that's been
yeah.
the very interesting transition for sure.
It's definitely an interesting transition, one that I'm still a year in, still
It might take
really
yeah, it might take a
struggling
while.
with. Because my next job after I was on the blacklist was like I did a pitch, which I booked it, but then I got very lucky that they didn't ask me for any outlines. They were just like, yeah, that sounds good, or go write it. And I was like, oh, thank God. I don't like, this is just not the way I do things. Because the pitch was basically an outline. So now that I'm working on my next like original spec, it becomes like just that much harder to like change the way you write. But that's kind of just the expectation a little bit. We have about 10 minutes left, so I want to now let's get into your origin story a little bit. So Clementine is a sort of a thriller action thing. You've written thriller, you've written horror, action, and all these things. What, I guess, is there a movie or a show or a filmmaker or a writer that was like, this is who I want to be? And, you know, like, who are your biggest influences as a writer? And what are your favorite genres to work in? I'm gonna, all of it. Answer all of that. Go.
So I'll start with the influence because not a lot of people ask me that question. I'm not sure if anyone has this year actually. So
yes,
kudos to you. The answer might surprise you, man. But I'll explain why this is the case. It's actually the Coen Brothers.
Okay.
Big Lebowski is one of my favorite movies ever, and I remember my first. I feel like every writer kind of, well, not every writer, but I feel like a lot of writers have this experience where they read a script written by a professional writer, and then you kind of have that aha moment where you're like, oh, this is how it's done.
Mm-hmm.
For me, that was the Coen Brothers with reading Raising Arizona.
Okay.
Like many years ago. I was an intern in post-production, and I was reading Raising Arizona, and the script moves so quickly, and the characters are so distinct, and I was just so engaged, enthralled. And you know, I'm not saying it's necessarily the kind of script that's going to blow someone's mind. Like, it's not as highly touted as like, you know, Chinatown or what have you.
I mean, I'm a big Coen Brothers guy, so you're speaking to the right audience.
Yeah, so like it's just as far as like writing style, like they write like very. It's almost surprising how conventional it like it's just so, it looks like what you're taught, but like with voice and just like done extremely well. It's not like the really crazy formatting that you might see in like a Nightcrawler script or like other scripts, what have you. It looks like a screenplay like that you're shown in college, but just like the voice is beautiful, and the way that the story carries is just so incredible. It's barely, you know, every paragraph is like 2-ish lines. That had a huge influence on you know, I think, and I was actually talking to another writer about this. Like, once I realized why I really liked a screenplay, that really helped me. Yes, it's good to know what not to do, for sure, obviously. And it's also, I'm sure some people want to look at professional scripts and be like, oh, what's selling? What gets done? That's all fine and dandy. But I think for me, there was a point in my development when I really understood why I liked a screenplay and what made me really enjoy it. And I kind of wanted to replicate that feeling. So that has a lot to do with my voice. So I would say the Coen Brothers, writing wise, biggest influence on me. As far as genres go, sci-fi is my first bay. Blade Runner was the movie that kind of kicked it off for me.
Okay.
Worked at Blockbuster a long time ago, rented it, fell in love, realized that people got paid to write movies, wanted to do it.
Sure.
So yeah, I Blade Runner did it for me. I love these days. I've been really influenced by the past like decade, like the 2010s. I watched you know, movies like Drive, you know, as far as the thriller aspect, really into movies, anything from Jeremy Saulnier, like Blue Ruin, Green Room.
I watched Green Room for the first time about a month ago, and it's so good.
It's out of control. It's completely out of control. Yeah, man, stuff like that. Quentin Tarantino is another guy. I really like how I love his action stuff. Like, people, you know, there's a lot to love about Quentin Tarantino, sure. But I've always been a fan, particularly of how he just like blocks his action and how he, you know, shows and how much fun it is, how impactful it is. You know, people are like flying off screen from bullet shots. So all that stuff is really cool to me. So yeah, like, you know, thrillery sci-fi. Prospect is like one of my favorite movies. Ex Machina, all that stuff.
Love Ex Machina.
My jam. Yeah, her as well.
Oh yeah. What was the first thing you wrote, and what was the first good thing you wrote?
Oh my God. The first thing I wrote was right after watching Blade Runner. I wrote a sequel. I shit you not, man.
We've all done it. X-Men 2 was one of my first things I wrote.
I love it. Yeah, no, it was a 160-page script, and I wrote it in a Word doc,
Yep.
Microsoft Word doc.
Did the exact same thing, man.
Formatted it manually. I looked up how to format a screenplay on the internet and opened Word, and first draft was about 160 pages. The first good thing I wrote is that's a really interesting question because I have so many different phases as a writer.
Sure.
So I say the first script that got like mostly positive reviews of mine is this script called Get In. It's like actually very much in the vein of like Drive. About this kid who drives for the mob, falls in love with a girl. This bad guy wants him to steal from the mob that he works for, that kind of thing. But that script's not really good. It just like people liked it. The first script that I think
was that the one that
good.
Was that the one that made you think like, oh, maybe I can do this, like for money eventually?
I sometimes I thought about that before that script. So that was like back in 2013, I want to say.
Okay, so you wrote Get In before Jordan Peele wrote Get Out.
Yeah.
Interesting.
I started it all.
Interesting.
Yeah. Just FYI. So, yeah, that happened. But like the first time I knew I had like a really, like when I knew I could write something special, I would say it was like 2018 when I wrote Intergalactic, and people had a really, really strong response to that movie. It made people cry, and I would say that's when I was like, oh wow, I actually wrote something not just good, but like something that I can maybe even confidently say is great, based on what people are telling me at least. So I'd say from there, as you can see, there was a 5-year difference between those two scripts, but it took me a long time. Not an overnight success at all. But yeah, that was probably the first script I realized, I can do big things here.
All right, David, we actually only have about 3 minutes left, which is crazy. I have so many questions I'm not going to get to, but that is the nature of this podcast.
Yeah.
So before we go further, I want to give you, and Zoom, because Zoom's going to cut us off, so I want to give you this opportunity to plug anything that you want to plug, to tell people where they can follow you, whatever.
Oh, I mean, yeah, you can find me on Twitter, at Storyteller Dave, all one word. And I don't know if I have anything to plug really.
That's okay. Plug your Twitter.
Yeah,
you're one of the kings of screenwriting Twitter, so that works.
I mean, hey man, I'm just trying to be. I'm just inspired by everyone else, so I'm very fortunate to make all the friends that I have through Twitter, and I'm looking forward to making more. So that's all I got really that I could think of. Hopefully people check out Scripts on the Blacklist if they have the link.
And the unofficial link that doesn't exist but is definitely out there.
I'll speak of. And hopefully they see me on there, and yeah, man. So that's all I got really.
With our little bit of remaining time, I want to get to know you on an even deeper level, to ask some real hard questions, deep questions. I want to get to know your soul. But first, I do have to do one more ad. Many podcasts are brought to you by BetterHelp, but not 39-minute conversations for some reason, not yet, at least, and I'd like to change that. Is it unfortunate that mental health care is not covered by a lot of health insurance? For sure. Mental health care is a pretty broken system in America. We shouldn't be dependent upon an app to provide a service that we should all have access to, but hey, that's our reality. And in that reality, I feel fortunate to have found a great therapist on BetterHelp. It's the beginning of a new year. We're all trying to work on ourselves and be the best versions of ourselves, and that is hard to do on your own. We all need a little help sometimes, and BetterHelp has been there for me. So if you're looking for affordable mental health care that works for you on your schedule and budget, yeah, there's worse options than BetterHelp. David.
Yes, sir.
We're recording this podcast as 2022 comes to an end, but when this episode's released, it will be 2023. Do you have any New Year's resolutions this year?
Oh, man. I have one is to get back into the gym consistently. That's number one. The other is there's 2 features I think I want to write in 2023 for sure. I mean, I have resolutions and I have goals. Goals is to get staffed, Clementine gets picked up by a studio, all that jazz. But as far as like things I can control, which I assume resolutions are, get back in shape a little bit and write these 2 features I want to write.
Is there anything about you that you want to leave behind in 2022 and not bring with you into the new year?
Ooh, the only thing I can think of is I want to. I've been saying yes maybe too often to opportunities.
Mm.
I maybe this is just because I want to make time to write those things that I talked about, but I think I'm going to have a slightly higher bar for what I choose to work.
Your meeting has ended. Goodbye.
Thank you for listening to 39-Minute Conversations, hosted and produced by Brian T. Arnold. Music by Kevin MacLeod, licensed under Creative Commons by Attribution 4.0 license. If you like what you heard, please subscribe and tune in for new episodes, and don't forget to rate and review. If you didn't like what you heard, please don't do any of that. That's okay too. Thank you, and we'll see you next time. Stay safe and be well.